Thanks everyone for being here. And you can see we're having some technical difficulties. It's ag, it's imperfect. It's a little bit rough and raw. But we appreciate everyone being here. So this is our theoretical agenda if we're able to get our growers in. So my name is Danny Bernstein. I'm the CEO of the Reservoir. I'm also the managing partner of Reservoir Ventures. And I'm really excited to be able to talk about this passion project, which began as a way to try to address rural technology challenges and try to solve really important problems faster, and has evolved into something really significant. And something we're really excited about, and something we're hopeful of expanding, which we'll talk a little bit about today. And so what I'm going to do mostly is kind of walk you through that vision, and then we will hear from two growers, assuming we can work through our challenges. Looks like Josh was able to join, which is great. Hey, Josh. And then we'll have Matt Hoffman as well from Driscoll's. Both of them are really kind of at the intersection of growing at scale, sort of commercial grade, production grade, high value crop farming. Hey, Josh. And they're also involved in ag tech every day. You know, I've been on a farm with Josh before when he's looking at a machine and evaluating it and giving feedback to a startup. Same with Matt. They're super engaged. And so, of all the growers that we know, Josh and Matt were really our top choices here because of kind of how they engage, and we really appreciate them taking some time here today. And it's just phenomenal. And then we'll have some time for Q&A. So I'm going to dive in. So what we're going to do today is talk about what is Reservoir Farms, really, how did it come to be, and things like that, a little bit of that backstory, and then get into some of the details about how we're operating it and things like that. So if you all have interest in partnering with us, or interest in being a startup in residence or a project in residence, we have Pat and Gonzalo, who manage all of that outreach and talk to 5 or 6 companies every single day about what we're doing, and answering questions and getting their feedback. So a little bit about the backstory, like why are we here? Why are we doing Reservoir Farms? Why are we building a new thing? And I'll let you kind of all take this in. So California agriculture is a massive industry, and it's not just about California. It's about growing specialty crops, growing nutrient-rich, fresh produce, fruits and vegetables in the places that we live. And the challenge with high value crop and specialty crop agriculture is that it is expensive, and it's becoming increasingly expensive to do in the places that we live. If you look, for example, I talk about the California asparagus a lot. Finding a California asparagus in a supermarket is becoming increasingly difficult. It's now only a $14 million crop in California. So a little bit of it is grown in Michigan, but it's an example of a incredibly nutrient-rich vegetable that has almost entirely moved to the global south, almost entirely grown in places like Peru or Mexico or Chile. And those are wonderful places. I have nothing against those countries, but we want to be able to grow food where we live. We want to be able to sustain California agriculture. And there are a few reasons why we care about this. One is that in order to sustain the grower operations, these multi-generational farming operations, being able to have fresh food delivered locally, being able to know exactly where your food comes from, to be able to visit that farm, that matters. For us to be able to have our own food supply as California or as Australia or as the United Kingdom, that also matters. The other part of it that we are really passionate about is rural economies. So I live in Monterey County. Monterey County is a $4 billion agricultural industry. But if you look at the trends, that could become increasingly difficult to sustain. And the ripple effects of agriculture exiting our rural economies is massive. It's really the backbone of the rural parts of the United States, of rural regions of Australia, of Western Europe, et cetera. So we're on a mission with the Reservoir to deliver the technology that we need to sustain agriculture. Western Growers, who's a partner of the Reservoir, they estimate that less than 2% of specialty crop production is automated. So we have this moment where technology goes from being a nice to have to a must have. And so someone like Josh Roberts from Taylor went from being a grower to someone who is thinking every single day about what is the technology we need to sustain agriculture in places like California. We focus on 3 different areas, and there, of course, is some overlap here. Robotics and automation, and you can see a couple of examples of what are the applications. We also look at AI-enabled software. That can be software on a computer, on a tablet, on a phone, or delivered from aerial imagery. And we also look at all manner of precision technology, sensors, and different things like that. What you don't see on here in terms of what the reservoir focuses on is that we're not yet focused on ag biotech. We're not yet focused on biologicals and call it like different sort of pesticide alternatives or how the chemicals of agriculture are evolving. We call that kind of like a chapter 2 for us. So these are our primary focus areas. And we do expect that to evolve, but these are the primary areas that we're focused on. So ag tech is imperative. We've established this, but there are challenges with ag tech. Ag tech struggles to scale. It struggles in some cases to survive. So last year, the reservoir worked with Western growers and executed a very, very, very broad survey to understand this. We wanted to understand, why does ag tech struggle? And there are a lot of reasons, but we've boiled it down to 4 that we're really going to focus on today. One is testing constraints. It is challenging for startups to test. If you are a robotics company and you need access to a farm every single day, that is just a difficult thing to do. Growers are busy. Sometimes growers are able to take a startup under their wing, but someone like Matt Hoffman, who just joined, he maybe can only work with a few startups at a time because Matt also has a full-time job. So his job is not just to be a startup coach. So it's really, really challenging for startups to get access to testing environments and get access to that feedback. I've spoken to startups who are based in the Bay Area, but their testing conditions might be 5 hours away. And even if their testing conditions are 5 hours away, they still have to convince that grower to work with them in the right way for testing. And some growers say, listen, I don't mind you testing here, but I can't let you fail on my crop. Like, it's just not going to work. I don't have that kind of flexibility. So that's a challenge. And that's one of the challenges we're aiming to solve. The second one is, are startups living agriculture? Are they living it with the grower? And we found that by and large, they're not. And we want to make that easier. So I spoke to a startup the other day and they said, I'm really excited about Reservoir Farms. I'm really excited about Salinas. Tell me when you have an event and I'll come down. I said, no, I don't think you get it. And they're like, no, I'll come to your events. I'm like, no, I don't think you get it. And they're like, okay, well, what if we test in Salinas? And I'm like, I'm still not sure you get it. I think you need to be here. I think you need to be here and be part of the community and integrate as much as possible. You'll have to make that trade-off. And so what we're looking for with Reservoir Farms is to make it easier for builders to get into agricultural communities, to meet growers, to integrate. But then also we want to see that builders are following the crop around the world. There's this misconception in agriculture and agriculture technology that you get one season and that's it. But that's certainly not how growers view it. I spoke to Brian Antle from Tannemer and Antle, and he told me that one day in the winter, his dad would just say to him, Brian, it's time to move the family to Yuma. And it would not be the same day every year, but every year up until 5th grade, Brian spent half the school year in Salinas and half the school year in Yuma. And if you're a startup, we basically can convey to you that we will have the same expectation, that you're following the crop. Another issue that we identified is that startups are very spread out. If you look at a map of California, and if you were to put a pin into where all the startups are located, you might have one in Santa Maria, one in Lemoore, one in Woodland, one in Davis, etc. But what we've seen with tech is that the denser the hub, the higher likelihood those startups are to succeed. And so part of why we're, let's say, betting on Salinas right now is we're really looking to convert Salinas or evolve Salinas into a 24/7, 365 startup community. And that's a lot of what we're trying to achieve with Reservoir Farms. And the last one is, how accelerators and incubators, the models of Silicon Valley don't always translate. The average ag tech incubator is an office space in a suburban environment with fluorescent lighting. It does not give startups access to a farm, access to growers, access to customers, etc. So these insights are what led us to Reservoir Farms. So our short of it is this. There are over 7,000 startup incubators worldwide, but we're yet to find one that combines a professional specialty crop farm, a professionally farmed specialty crop farm with world-class grower partners that combines that with a deep tech R&D space. And that's what we're building. So Reservoir Farms is an on-farm, we call it an on-farm robotics incubator. It's more than just robotics for the future of specialty crops. So a company joins Reservoir Farms, and we'll talk about what that looks like. On day one, they get access to a shop and they get access to a farm. So gone are the days where a roboticist is struggling for months to find a shop that's near a farm, that's near growers. We can give that to them on day one. And immediately they're plugged in with growers. We'll talk about our Salinas location. And it is in the busiest intersection, arguably, in all of Salinas. So when I'm there at Reservoir Farms, I have growers who drive by, see me, honk, wave, and I pull them over and I'm like, come and look what we're doing. We also have a lot of incredible partners in the industry. And we'll talk about that. So another thing that startups struggle with is they might have access to a farm, they might have access to growers, but they don't have access to the tractor companies. They don't have access to dealers. That's something we're trying to make really easy. And we also want to give them access to data and validation capabilities. So Matt and I, for example, Matt Hoffman and I have been talking about this for months. How do we really set up R&D trials that are legitimate, that can be marketed, and that growers, if they look at it, will buy into the data? So our value proposition is that we help startups accelerate. The average startup might plod through these different venture phases. It might take them years to build a prototype, years to get access to the right customers. We're trying to do all of that as quickly as possible. We're trying to accelerate these companies. So I'm not going to read every word in the slide, but this kind of gives you a sense of the kinds of things we're making available to companies. We're giving them access to growers. We're giving them access to a farm, to run tests, to collect data, to do R&D. We're giving you access to a shop. We have a fab and machine shop. We'll also have private shop spaces. We also have workforce partnerships. So another challenge of ag tech companies is that they might have these sort of amazing software and mechanical engineers, but they don't have anybody in their team that can drive a tractor, haul a trailer, do basic fab and machine shop work. And we have those connections locally. We can connect you with those folks from community colleges, from Cal State University. And so you have somebody who's plugged into your team who already knows how to drive a tractor. I think the average ag tech startup has no one on the team who actually knows how to drive a tractor. True story. And it's shocking because most ag tech products are actually just smart implements that are dragged in the back of a tractor. So that's something that we want to make available to you. We also have a great partnership network around ag with companies like John Deere. And then we also give you a space to meet investors, meet partners, and meet customers. So we are starting in Salinas. That is our first location. Then we're planning to expand. We'll be talking a lot more about this in the coming months, but our second location will be in the Central Valley. And then our third location will be in wine country in Sonoma County. But today the focus is Salinas because that is our first location and we're opening in just a few months. So what's neat about our Salinas location is that it is arguably positioned at Salinas's most visible intersection. So this is a powerful marketing platform for any ag tech company or startup. And it's part of why we've gotten a lot of sort of early interest and excitement. You can kind of see here in this really fun abstract map that our marketing team created that the most recognizable growers, shippers, producers, dealers, etc., are all within about a 5, 10, maybe 15-minute drive of Reservoir Farms. We can get to the Driscoll's office in maybe 10 or 15 minutes, just right down Hitchcock Road, which is at our corner. You can practically see the Tannemer and Antle offices. The Taylor Farms headquarters is just a 8-minute drive into Main Street. So companies that are struggling with this integration into an agricultural community to kind of supercharge their growth, we can address that for you on day one. And there are a couple other names I want to point out here. We're very close to RDO and PAR, who are two of the most respected dealers in this world. And dealers matter so much in ag, and it's completely underestimated because it's most likely the case that your product will not be sold directly to growers. It's most likely going to be sold to dealers who will service your product and resell it for you. And so part of our partnership network includes people like Bart Walker, who is the CEO of PAR. So what's happening with Salinas? Let me talk about it. So this is a picture of me with Brian Antle. Brian is the EVP of sales and at Tanimura and Antle and is on the board. And we leased land from the Tanimura family, 40 acres in Salinas. Our lease started just a few weeks ago in early June. And we are now prepping the ground. So if someone drives past Reservoir Farms, they'll see that it's beautifully, freshly kind of tilled and the ground is getting prepped. And we're about to start putting in strawberries. We're working with Nature Right berry growers, part of the sort of the strawberry fraternity in the region, and a kind of an active strawberry commission member. We announced that partnership yesterday, so we're starting to farm. And then in August, we will hold a preview event at the end of August, where we'll start to give tours of the facility and kind of show people what's there and the kinds of facilities we have. And then startups will start coming on site, and memberships will sort of officially begin in September. Great. So that is an intro to Reservoir Farms. And we're going to come back around to Q&A in a second. But first, we're going to hear from a few of our grower friends. So Josh Roberts is first up. And Josh is one of the most sort of engaged, candid voices in specialty crop ag tech, and someone I learn from every single time I talk to him. And he's a big part of why Taylor Farms is one of the most innovative leafy green and vegetable growers, producers, shippers in the world. So Josh, why don't you take it away? If you're able to unmute, there you go.
Yeah, good morning. That's a pretty heavy introduction. I appreciate that. It's somewhat true. That picture of me is more realistic, though. See the kind of the look on my face of being slightly confused. That's how I feel every day. No, I'm just kidding. I really appreciate your opening. So a little backstory on me, and then we'll talk about Taylor Farms. So I'm a third generation farmer in the Salinas Valley. I was born and raised in southern Monterey County. My father is a wine grape grower, still is, for Winty Family Estates. He's retired and still consults. So I don't know anything other than the Salinas Valley, but most of my career was spent up until about 7-8 years ago was spent working for shippers and processors. I worked for a small carrot company in Soledad, and then moved over into Fresh Express Salad with contract management and grower relations, and then was recruited to come to Taylor Farms in 2010. In 2010, I worked initially for Taylor under our regional raw product program, and that's where I really started to get the sense that there was a lot more to the ag industry than just Salinas, working with central Mexico and East Coast, and some international work as well. After that, I moved into the organic side of the business and developed our organic program, and again saw a lot of need for technology and just how grower innovation wasn't keeping up with the demand of kind of the margin constraints in our industry and the yield. And so always in the back of my mind, this burning thought that maybe I could help, maybe I could do it better than my neighbor. And so in 2017, I was given the opportunity to partner with Vic Smith, with JV Smith Companies, and I left Taylor Farms to pursue an acquisition-based farming venture here in Salinas. We bought out two aging farming companies, Triangle Farms and Scott Anthony Ranches. in short work, about a year, we put together a 12,000 crop acre farming operation solely through acquisition. And that really started the path towards how do you farm in a different way. And so luckily I was blessed with a decent capital plan with my partner and boss, Vic. He's very forward thinking and gave us a fair amount of autonomy to vet new technology. So we actually considered Triangle Farms our test bench, a very high scale test bench, but we were the first farming company to bring carbon robotics into the Salinas Valley. I worked with them on their, I still am on their ag advisory board, but the goal there was we had 4,000 acres of organic baby leaf crop that we were spending $2,000 to $3,000 an acre weeding, and carbon was just coming down the pike out of Washington, and we're doing some work in onions. I found them on YouTube, ironically. So the point of all that is that Danny's point of Salinas and the access, even though the Silicon Valley is only an hour away, there's a massive disconnect, and it seems that no matter what efforts are put forward today with money, it still seems that we are in this weird paradigm of disconnect. So I do agree with everything that you said. I think we have an opportunity there. So anyway, flash forward to today. I'm back at Taylor Farms. There was an opportunity here to focus on Taylor Farms, specifically their ag tech needs. The primary focus is automating harvest. And so I split my role here. 25% of my world is spent in harvest automation and ag technology. The second 25% is spent developing genetics, whether that's traditional breeding or modified breeding technologies that we're looking into. The third is I manage that care company I worked for before, and then finally back in the regional growing development. And so Bruce is foot on the gas. We can't do this quick enough, and he's made large investments, and the family has, into the Western Growers Ag Tech incubator here in the bottom of our office for those reasons. I think we've made some massive strides, and we probably arguably have some access quicker and faster than others, but we definitely think there's a void here. So we're real excited to pursue that with you guys.
Great. Well, thank you, Josh. I mean, maybe just a question for you before we hand over to Matt is, if a company is sort of thinking about why Salinas, and do they need to be in Salinas, or what's the value of, let's say, where they are today versus being integrated into a community like Salinas? I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. So the Salinas Valley and moreover the specialty crop market that we participate in it's a very, very small footprint, but a very large dollar in value crop between berries and leafy greens. It's an exorbitant amount of spend here. I think Salinas specifically with this geography is the best spot to be if you want to have an opportunity to be successful. Arguably, you could have the best technology, the best solution, and if you don't have the access or the exposure to the right folks, there's a chance that you will go broke before you find that success. And it's a sad reality, but it is one of the games that you must be present to win in. And the grower audience is somewhat, and I'm speaking out of an opinion here, but my opinion is that the grower audience is somewhat split between being traditionalists and very much, I do this because my daddy did it. Ironically, like a lot of what we do is programmed and systemic, and then it's split by a few folks that really are pioneers in technology, but maybe don't have access to time and or capital. So if you're growing lettuce in the Salinas Valley and you're harvesting, our harvest season's April through November, you're working 365 days a year. your downtime is spent doing something else on the farm. And so the opportunity for you to break free, to even drive to San Jose, let alone spend the hours and hours that you would need to really facilitate growth with the technology, it's limited. So it's incumbent upon any of these startups to come our way. And then access is really tricky because the language isn't the same, right? Like it's different. I get it. I have a group of ag engineers that report to me, and I'm at the office at 6 o'clock every day, and they roll in at 10, right? And for a few months that aggravated me, but I realized that we also need to work together, and we need to figure out how to understand each other's goals, wants, and needs. And I think being here immersed in our valley would also bring the culture to the equation, and I think that's the key. And I think this is a really great opportunity because I think the tractor driving point, all that's absolutely paramount to success. Good dirt, good exposure, and being able to kind of develop that technology even when access is limited. So anyway.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Josh. Thank you so much. We'll really appreciate you being here and hanging around for the Q&A. And I'm also now excited to tee up Matt Hoffman. So Matt was one of the first, ag tech and agricultural folks that I met. And what I love about people who work in agriculture is that they are, I would say, by and large, really excited to engage with folks from outside of agriculture. And I think about it a little bit like people who love classic cars, where they really want to tell you about their Austin Healey collection and why it matters and how to, why they should love Austin Healey and how to, it's a really similar thing because it's a passion, but it's also a concern for the longevity of something that matters. And I think Matt really embodies that, and he's so generous with his time and does a lot of these things, kind of call it in his spare time as a hobby. And Matt was quick to agree to engage today. So Matt, welcome. And I will do my best to click through your slides as well. You're muted. You're still muted. Let's see if we can help you. You may have to. There we go.
How's that?
You got it. Perfect.
All right. Thanks for having me, Danny. Hello, everybody. So I'm just going to go through a few quick slides so you get a little bit of an overview of Driscoll. So you can do slide, Danny. Driscoll's is a global berry program, global berry company. And I like taking a moment to talk about our mission because I haven't worked at many places in my career. So I don't have too much of a contrast, but something that is very special about Driscoll's is the mission is definitely not something that's just written down and forgotten about. It is something that is referenced constantly in meetings, before we make decisions. And it is the business model, right? So our mission is to continually delight berry consumers, right? Through alignment with our customers that are mostly retailers and then growers. And that delight is basically supplying berries that customers love. And we like to say that one clamshell sells the next one. And so we are a berry company. A lot of you guys are technology companies. And so that is one bit of advice that I have is you got to remember that you are trying to work in ag. And so your identity may be couched in tech. And it's very useful to don't forget about that because that's what you're bringing to ag, but start to identify as working in the ag industry, right? And the thing we're trying to do is supply berries. So it's all about berry supply to us, right? And technologies have to improve supply. And now the alignment with our growers and our customers is key. Driscoll's does not exist without our growers. We aren't the grower. We work with about 900 independent growers globally in about 20 plus different countries. And then our consumers are the ones that our customers are ones that purchase the berries from us, and then the consumers are the customers of our customers. So Driscoll's is a 100-year-old company. There's a pretty amazing, rich history in Watsonville and the rest of California and globally, but it got started in Watsonville. The majority shareholder family, the writers, are still extremely involved. Miles is the president of the board. His kids and his brother's kids are peppered throughout the business. And so it's a very personal, familial place to work. And innovation has been pretty key to basically all of Driscoll's does. So here's a little bit about our global footprint. Like I said, 20 something countries, but California is still the heart and epicenter of Driscoll's. Slide, Danny.
Oops.
You can skip. All right, go back to the agtech process.
Oh, okay.
One slide forward. Yeah, so this is probably what you guys are really eager to look at. This is how we engage with technology companies. We do a pretty good job of staying focused on what our problems are, and we're always getting better at figuring out what those are. For breeding, we call them berry concepts. And for technology and best practices, we call them innovation concepts. So these are the problems we're trying to solve that help us produce that desired supply curve. And we really stay focused on that. And part of my job is to scout for technology companies. And I do that through attending conferences. We have third parties that help us with technology scouting. But really, to be honest, a lot of it is just participating in the ag industry, participating in the ag tech world, and paying attention. We select companies that are one-for-one relationship between a problem we're trying to solve and a problem or a solution. And then we use a lot of just judgment and understanding how the business process works. If I can't envision or use some creativity and foresight into thinking, if this solution works, can it practically fit into our existing business processes and current grower economics, then it's probably a solution that we'll pass on. Growers are willing to adapt their processes a bit, but I mean, you can't imagine what it's like. If you drastically change a farming process, everything else around it has to change. And that is 9.9 times out of 10 too much to ask of a grower to adopt a technology. When a technology works, after we've tried it, tested it, then we go into deployment. And that's actually the hardest part of all of this. So we do not tell our growers how to farm, but they listen to us and respect Driscoll's opinion on is a technology worth considering. So our goal with our tech companies when we go into deployment is to reduce the grower's risk of adopting. And that's either financial risk, knowledge risk on understanding does it work, and then relationship risk because we've already established a relationship with those companies. And there is a development piece to it where, sometimes we'll work with a company to develop technology when it's a high priority problem and something like that doesn't exist. That's actually not what we're really good at. We've got a lot of passionate scientists and agronomists and other people in the company that like doing that type of work, but really Driscoll's is set up to help companies scale and not start. And so that's one of the reasons why we like working with the Reservoir is if we find a company that's got what it takes, we can send them to the Reservoir and we can still be involved through advising, but all of that early stage development like TRL, 1 through 6, that can really be happening on the Reservoir farms with us, providing the knowledge and the subject matter expertise. And what we're really there to do is validate whether something works, has good grower economics, and then help that company go to market and deploy with our growers. So that's our ag tech program at a super high level, and questions are where the good stuff happens.
Great. Well, thank you, Matt, so much. And really appreciate what you're saying. And I think what's been cool about watching our relationship evolve with Driscoll's as well as with Taylor is that they have R&D in-house. And so one of the questions when we launched the Reservoir was, would we be valuable to entities like Driscoll's or Taylor or the Wonderful Company or Gallo who have their own R&D? And what we've learned is that the answer is yes, because they, even though they have R&D resources, their resources are finite. And what they really excel in some cases is when the technology is closer to readiness. And so could we help scale your R&D resources? Could we reduce and lift some of that R&D burden, even for companies that have the resources to have their own R&D? So it's been great to learn from Matt and kind of how we can plug in with them. And he's been, and both Josh and Matt have been super helpful in kind of shaping where we are today. So we do have time for Q&A, which is great. And so Grace, who's our marketing manager, will help facilitate that. If you have any questions for our growers or for me, go for it.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the Q&A chat and I'll read them out. So we do have a few questions. One of them is, how can small farmers with very little capital afford applying these automated robotic and AI technologies?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I would love to hear from Matt and Josh because they really do work with lots of different farm sizes and growers of all shapes and sizes. I think there's a couple different things, but one is we expect that the cost of robotics is going to drastically decrease in the coming years, and we're really excited about that. And part of how we're trying to reduce the R&D burden on startups and growers is to help facilitate that. When there's a lot of very expensive R&D up front, what ends up happening in pricing is that a lot of that R&D cost is actually passed off to the grower. And you could argue that's fair. You could argue it's unfair. But if we can reduce a lot of that R&D cost because of open source models, because of cheaper, faster prototyping, then we will have less expensive products. Why do we have $1 million plus laser weeders, but a Tesla costs $35,000 if you're buying the entry level? That's confusing. And it doesn't always have to be that way. I think we understand why that's the case now, but we don't think it always has to be that way. So that's number one. Number two is we really encourage startups to experiment with service-based models. And then you also have dealers like a PAR who believes in a service-based model. So they might purchase the equipment, but then they're then pursuing a service model with the grower. And so I think what we're seeing is that there's going to be a lot of experimentation on commercialization, both on the ag tech side as well as on the dealer side. A company that I talk about a lot in the space that is doing great is BeWise. BeWise is, they just raised a big new funding round, and their click for them was they moved to an entirely service model. So they've actually taken over beekeeping for a lot of growers, not just selling the software, not just selling the technology as a service, but doing the entire service as a service. And that works for farmers of different sizes because you already have, let's say, a beekeeping budget, and BeWise can kind of help, plug into that. So that's my take, Charlie. But I absolutely welcome to hear from Matt and Josh as well.
I think.
I'll start. You go, Josh.
Oh, either way, I don't agree with what you said, Danny. I think when you look at deploying some of those technologies and the capital barrier, I think that's where, at least from a Taylor Farms perspective, we see that need. We depend on our growers to supply us raw product, and we typically contract that at a per acre rate. And so we know that R&D and that development cost is going to need to be shouldered somewhat by us. I think that was some of the thought around acquiring FarmWise recently, was just to take that burden off of the growers that had already committed some of that capital. Because I think that's another real risk in technology, is that there's a chance you're gambling. Hopefully it's a really good gamble that's vetted. And I like, Matt, your flow chart there on how you pursue those. We're similar there, but I do think we're willing to take a larger risk on our growers' behalf to develop that, to ultimately to get that technology to a tangible cost. I think PAR and other vendors like RDO have definitely leaned into sharing some of that risk. And the other interesting thing too is I do have some experience that banks are now a lot more open to lending money and leasing money with some of these technologies, where in the beginning, there was harder to find capital specifically for some of that. So I think there's a lot of creative ways to get it out there. I also think that anybody that's new in this space needs to understand that the large majority of the development cost is carried by the vendor themselves. So in some cases, if you're willing to put up the time and leverage a small amount of that kind of foreground IP to help develop this, it will pay dividends, because for at least a small amount of time, they're most of the time willing to run that technology on your farm for free, and that, I think that's a pretty standard experience.
Yeah. How can small farmers with very little capital afford applying these automated robotic and AI technology? I mean, some of them may not be able to be honest, right? Agriculture is very capital intensive. It's an annual cycle, and sometimes the grower would get paid once or twice throughout the year, and sometimes it's cyclical across a few years with, boom and bust periods. So capital is really important. And something that we learned with robotic solutions is you do need the scale with autonomy solutions. You usually do need the scale in order to take advantage of that, because, there's always going to be some human involvement in maintaining these solutions, even when everything goes right. And so if you're only using one autonomous sprayer and somebody's got to monitor it, you might as well just keep things simple and have a butt on a tractor. But if you could do 3, 4, 5 of them, then, maybe it'll pencil out. So today, this stuff is not for every grower. And so the TAM that you all put on your pitch deck to your investors is probably not accurate.
Excellent. I'm gonna pick a question out here. So for ag tech startups, what strategies have you seen that worked to gain access to farms, especially berry farms, for piloting or early testing? So I'll take the first crack at that, and then Matt and Josh, please take it away. I mean, I think one thing that's worth emphasizing is that we agree that that's challenging to get that access. It can sometimes take months, but part of the reason why Reservoir Farms exists is to make that go from months to literally one day. So if you're with us, if you're a member at Reservoir Farms, you get access to an acre of strawberries, let's say on day one, and you can save a lot of that sort of persuasion energy for when your product is a little bit further along. And that's a big part of the goal here. We want you to be able to kind of do that grower convincing when you have more conviction or maybe a higher TRL. And that's a big part of the problem we're trying to solve. But, Matt and Josh, I mean, I think it'd be great to hear from the two of you, like, what are you looking for from an ag tech startup that, in order to kind of carve out a little space for them or carve out a little bit of your time?
Getting in touch with growers is really hard. And that's one of the values that the Reservoir provides. It's one of the values that Driscoll's provides. So we're all gatekeepers, right? Like, I'm not going to just make introductions to tech startups to our growers because they ask for it. Like, they've got to go through our own internal vetting process and everything I talked about before. Those companies that I've seen on their own do it really well. They've become local companies, right? If they're a pest and disease management company, maybe they've hired a local PCA. Maybe they've relocated a portion or all of their business to a production region. That most of these technology founders are not homegrown people that grew up in that industry or that town, but they've made that industry their home. And agriculture is kind of traditional in that there's multi-generation relationships. People are spreading kind of opinions and words at the coffee shop, sort of a thing. And so you really just have to be there and participate in the community and build a reputation and put yourself out there socially and ask growers to visit them and ask to test in their field. And you're probably going to get turned down a lot of times, and that's okay, because those growers probably weren't good fits to do early work on. But one of the questions I ask any company when I'm trying to figure out if they got what it takes to succeed is, do they have a relationship with the grower? And if the answer is no, I'll give them some advice on how to do it. But this is one of those scenarios where you just got to go figure it out. And it's probably not going to be super easy, but that's the process of learning and becoming embedded in an industry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I think it's really important to find, typically that success comes from showing up with a somewhat of a solution as well. So I think it's important to have solutions like this, and then also it is very much a word of mouth industry around here. So finding somebody that has the competency in our space to be able to have those accesses, is important.
So if you're set up at Reservoir Farms and it's a venue to meet growers, that's worth a lot.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's what we're trying to do for sure. Sort of utilize the network we have and help you show up in a way that makes that a lot easier. So I'm going to pick another question here. This is from anonymous attendee. Is there anything you guys are doing to reduce the burden barrier to entry for crop protection companies when it comes to CADPR regulatory regulations to register products? So I'm going to speak a little bit like at a broader sense to this, and we'll move on to the next question, which is part of the goal of Reservoir Farms, part of the handful of goals is, can we create this place for regulators, for policymakers to come and just check out ag and to kind of reduce some of or address some of the misconceptions around some of these regulated areas. Another one that we feel pretty strongly about is autonomy. If you go to San Francisco these days, you will see Waymos everywhere. Yet autonomous tractors are actually more regulated than self-driving cars. It's really confusing. And so part of our goal here is to have some of these technologies on display, whether those are ag biotech technologies as well as autonomy technologies, and be able to engage and hear from regulators. And we want to be able to kind of create a much more sort of a collaborative environment where it's not just at a conference in Sacramento or a sort of a chance meeting with a regulator that you can have this conversation, but it's something that we do a little bit more regularly. So that is a goal for us. A couple other questions here. This is from Moran. How long does it usually take a company like Taylor Farms to adopt a robotics technology? What is your vetting process, et cetera? So Josh, I'll let you take that one.
So the majority of our experience with robotics at Taylor Farms is in our factories. So we have several salad factories and manufacturing facilities where we convert raw product into value-added salad. And so most of our experience in robotics has been there. One interesting nuance so long story short is there isn't robotic technology specific to our space in the industry. So we've had to adapt. So you look at companies like Fanuc robots, for example, the majority of that is in biomed and in automotive. If you kind of their pro rata share. And so what we've done is we've gone out and enlisted strong partnerships with vendors who can bring that technology and then adapt it to what our needs are. And as far as the time it takes, it really depends on the goal. Everything we do here is in a sprint fashion. So we typically lean into a high risk ratio and try to push as fast as we can. We have limited opportunity to install these products and to vet them. So most of the work is done offline and inline at the same time. So we'll typically start with one salad line and convert it to automation, whether it's a pack out line or the front end and something as simple as a bin dumper, all the way to the back end if we're using optical sorting. But we'll do it one line at a time, and I think we have some stories around rollouts less than a year at this point there, and then out in the field it's a little longer. There's a significant investment in the field, and the field environment is not as controlled. And so we find that takes a little bit more time.
Excellent. We have a question here from Mark. For Taylor and Driscoll's, who have internal R&D teams, how does the tech transfer process look from R&D to the growers themselves and internal managers, considering there can be a valley in tech transfer adoption from the R&D team to commercial due to resources, time, et cetera? So how do you kind of think about adopting internal R&D or internal development?
I think the question was, what does the process look like to go from testing of does it work to grower adoption? Like, what does Driscoll's do to help that out? I mean, we use some pretty traditional agricultural extension practices, field days, demos. We put a lot of, professionally done literature together. But that's just the starting point. For example, we recently started standing up these called innovation clubs, where when we have a technology that's been deployed, we get our agronomy teams on board, and their commitment is to make sure they visit those fields using a particular technology twice a season. They talk to the growers, they talk to the tech companies, maybe they talk to PCAs, they talk to anybody necessary, they get eyes on the field, and then we meet twice a season and everybody kind of reports back. What did we see? What do we think? How is this going? So that way, internal to Driscoll's, we can form a collective opinion from the field perspective on how is something going, and then we use that to make strategic decisions of, how do we push this? Do we push this? Get leadership buy-in, communicate those insights to the growers. So every technology is a little bit different on how we deploy it, but the end game is to bring many people along the process of learning and making their own decisions of, is this something that's going to benefit the Driscoll's enterprise, especially the growers.
So we're going to switch now, Matt and Josh, into our rapid fire Q&A to go through the rest. So I'll ask these questions, and then your challenge is to answer in call it 30 seconds or less, or maybe 15 seconds or less. From Michael, is mildew a significant problem for strawberry farmers? Matt?
Yes, and there's geographic variation.
Very good. All right, this is from Anuj. I'll send this one to Josh. What are the most important factors you look for when choosing transportation and broker partners for your fresh produce?
Cost and quality of the transport. So overall low cost and overall receiving quality based on temperature and abuse.
Okay, this is another one for Josh. Chemical spraying. What is the future of chemical spraying?
That's broadly, I think the future of chemical spraying will be a staple in our industry in the conventional space. I think our chemicals will change, but I think we will always spray something.
All right, this is one for Matt. Is short on how do you approach adopting new field robotics, such as weeding robots and other robotics?
In strawberries, it's going to be very hard to do automated weeding. Mechanical weeding will be good for in the furrows. And other than that, robotics has not really cracked into the strawberry industry. It's a tough crop to automate, and there are no winners in the harvest space yet. But there's other activities like, de-leafing or deflowering, deblossoming, runner thinning, but that's not a problem for Driscoll's. And also, don't forget the nurseries have some automation opportunities.
Okay, last question, and a great question from Taryn, and we'll put it to both Matt and Josh. What are the most strategic ways for a recent graduate to break into the ag tech or ag industry in general?
Go ahead, Matt.
Driscoll's has one of the best internship programs in the produce industry, something that we're really proud of. And I can think of at least 5 people just off the top of my head that are like 15 years into Driscoll's right now and started as interns. So my advice is start in ag, even if you want to work in tech. Start in ag and then transition to tech. You'll be a lot more valuable than the other way around.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you actually want to be in this space, I think you have to start with those connections in the network. I think also, you know, do your best to get in wherever you can, but make sure you find an employer that has the same philosophies and is actually interested in that. Because I think you could find yourself stuck if you don't kind of collaborate with a progressive employer.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you, Matt and Josh, so much. And thank you to our over 100 attendees and participants who came through today, for your attention, for your time. If you'd like to get in touch and learn more or kind of hear more about Reservoir Farms, you can certainly find a way to reach us on our website. The best email address is contact@reservoir.co. It's not reservoir.com. That cost $500,000 to buy that domain. So we are reservoir.co, contact@reservoir.co. And again, thanks so much for your time, for your interest. We will do more of these, and we look forward to hearing from you. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks so much.